Welcome to the Double Vision podcast. We are identical twin sisters who grew up with a rare retinal condition, which basically means we've had to do a lot of adapting. My name is Jenelle, and I'm the oldest by 4 whole minutes, so naturally I get to go first.
And I'm Joy. A lot of our life has been problem solving, a lot of feelings, and realizing that we're probably not the only ones navigating this.
I work as a therapist, and I tend to slow things down and look for what's steady underneath it all.
And I'm a writer and creative. I have a background in education, and I navigate the emotional journey in real time.
She does, and we balance each other out.
Jenelle keeps one foot on the ground.
And Joy keeps things honest and alive.
On Double Vision Podcast, we talk about the social and emotional experience of being in a body.
The stuff we all deal with: identity, belonging, and self-trust.
We talk about anxiety and overthinking,
and what it looks like to advocate for yourself and keep going, even when it's hard.
We make space for the parts that don't show up on paper, but shape our whole lives.
If you've ever felt like you're trying to figure out how to be yourself out loud,
you're in the right place. Hi, this is Joy. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited today to dive into a topic that kind of relates to something we've been discussing about identity and how that is formed in each of us as human beings. But we are kind of taking a little different shift into storytelling, which is an adjacent topic since obviously the stories that we remember and grow up with and live day to day, they help to shape our identity, at least the stories that we tell ourselves. We, of course, have our own perspectives on everything. And I think when we start to realize that, that opens up a lot, because I think we sometimes think that everything that happens in our lives is just this factual thing and everybody is experiencing it and perceiving it the same ways. But when we really dig in, we realize that each of us has our own perceptions of what happens in our lives, and those don't always match. You can ask if anyone with siblings will tell you that you talk about that one thing that happened 10 years ago, and there will be different perspectives about it.
That's so true, Joy. And I'm excited to dive into this topic together.
Me too. I especially am so fascinated by the reason that we as humans are kind of meaning-making machines. Like, why do we have to make meaning out of everything? Why do we have to make a story mean something? They always say, even with, suffering, there's those 2 arrows, right? The first arrow is the sting and the part that's the pain, but then there's that second arrow, and that's what we believe about it, and that's what the story that we make about it, and that's where sometimes like the deepest suffering can come from. I'm just so curious from your perspective, Jenelle, as a therapist, why do you think it is that people make up stories even when maybe they're untrue or they don't have all the facts, but they are quick to jump to a conclusion?
Creating stories is what we do as humans to help us feel safe. We've been doing it for many years. So if you think back to thousands of years ago when we weren't certain about whether we were going to be included in a group or what was going to happen next, we had to create stories to encourage ourselves to keep going. And storytelling is such a rich part of so many different cultures. It's the way we make meaning out of life, the way we create safety. And so there's a lot of power in that. And one therapy modality that I really appreciate is narrative therapy. And it really allows people to take a story, say the story they're telling themselves is, I do everything wrong. That story would create a lot of disempowering thoughts and feelings, probably emotions of shame, anger, frustration, and then create behaviors and results that are more rooted in depression or anxiety. Whereas if you reframe that, do some cognitive reframing and work with narrative therapy to have the story of, oh, I make mistakes and that's how I grow, is really different story from I do everything wrong. And if you're coming from the story of I make mistakes and that's how I grow, that's a lot more empowering. That's going to create emotions of curiosity and enjoyment and happiness, and that's going to result in a different mood and different behaviors.
Such a good point. I remember you telling me one time, Jenelle, that kind of the root of behind any anxiety, I don't know, disorder, but maybe anxiety in general, it kind of goes back to this one thing. Can you remind me what that is?
Uncertainty. Our inability to be with uncertainty is really what creates a lot of anxiety disorders. So if you look at something like OCD, when people start to have compulsions, whether they be something behaviors or mental compulsions and behaviors, those are rooted in trying to manage uncertainty. So someone says, okay, if I check these locks 5 times before I leave the house and wash my hands a certain number of times or avoid stepping on these cracks, that is a way that they're acting out in an extreme way the inability to sit with the uncertainty. And so that's why the gold standard for treating OCD is exposure therapy. So you're learning to sit with the discomfort of, I don't actually know if these locks, I'm not 100% certain if the door is locked, and I'm going to sit with that rather than spending hours of my day repeating this behavior that's actually taking away from my life and perhaps becoming maladaptive.
Yeah, that's a good example of how uncertainty, when unchecked and when we just want to kind of have that certainty, can lead to behaviors and things that we don't want. And I mean, it makes sense to me because I myself don't like uncertainty. I mean, I think growing up with a degenerative condition and dealing with this in life kind of adds that layer of uncertainty. I think most people with a disability have that added layer of uncertainty. But as humans, we all have it, right? Because of aging and everything else that is uncertain, especially in our world today. I even heard this study recently about uncertainty. It was Maya Shankar, a behavioral researcher, was saying that basically when they did this study with humans and told them they were going to get an electric shock 100% of the time, they told one group that, and then they told another group that they had a 50% chance that they would receive an electric shock. And actually the group that experienced far more anxiety and fear was the group that was told that they would receive the shock 50% or that there was a 50% chance that they would receive the shock. The ones that handled it better were the ones that, they knew what was coming. And I thought that was so telling. I was like, gosh, that's not what I would have imagined.
Well, it's so relatable too, Joy, because I can think of so many experiences in my life and the lives of my friends and family where there's any sense of uncertainty about something does create that added anxiety of just the not knowing is really hard. It's a hard part of being human.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why we fill in the endings to stories, or we make up a story, because we'd rather have a story in mind and be certain about, oh, this is what happened, and our brains just fill it in, I think sometimes even unconsciously, than to be uncertain about what that means about us or our world or the person we had that interaction with. It's something that I've kind of been diving into recently because of some old stories. You know how sometimes old stories kind of come back up in the present? You're like, where is this coming from? This is from, like 25 years ago.
Yes, repeated stories, and stories do tend to repeat themselves over time. And there's those certain ones that if they're a really old story or a particularly painful one, they will continue to rise up until we're able to really work with them. And I know that you've had that experience somewhat recently, and I wanted to dive into that as part of our storytelling episode today.
Yeah. And I think the beginning of the story, gosh, I won't say 30 some years ago, maybe, because I was in 8th grade. And I think it actually kind of starts with you, the beginning of this story.
Yes. You reminded me of what a great eavesdropper
The best. You're the best
eavesdropper, especially when it came to our parents' conversations. There was a lot that I like to have my ears perked at all times. And I won't go into the psychology of all of that, but I'm sure we could analyze that. But I overheard something when we were in 8th grade that you were going to be getting a major award at the end of the school year, the Curtis White Award. And so I went to you and said, Joy, hey, I heard you're going to be getting this Curtis White Award. And I heard Mom and Dad talking about it. And I feel like you should know ahead of time so you're not just surprised at the school assembly. And you were pretty distraught when I told you this.
Oh, I was mortified. I did not want this award. I did not want this award.
Tell me and our listeners, why did you not want this award?
Well, it was given to one student annually, and any student that I had heard of who had gotten the award before was dead.
So you were receiving an award that only dead students had gotten before, only students that had died after. I'm not
to
making
my
any
knowledge.
sense.
I mean,
Your knowledge, all students that received this
It was
award
like
ended up dying. They were
Right.
people with cancer, people with some type of a terminal illness.
Yes. In my mind, and I don't know if this was, I of course was thinking, gosh, this is because of my eyes. I'm getting this special people award. I'm getting a pity award. And this wasn't earned. I mean, far worse than a participation award, right? Like to get an award for something that you're like, gosh, I didn't feel like I earned this, except that I was born in this body where my eyes don't work as well. Now I'm getting this award and I'm going to have to walk up in front of all my peers. And then to make it worse, it was kind of passing as sighted at that time for the most part. And so a lot of my peers, except for close friends, didn't know that I had vision loss. So after I received the award, I had so many kids coming up. Why did you get that? Why, like, do you have cancer? Are you dying? Like, why did you get that award? And I don't know. I don't know. I just said, I knew, but I didn't want to say it. And I had so much shame about, this award. And of course, deeper about that piece of my identity, of course.
So it sounds like the story you were telling yourself about the award is, this is a pity award and I don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I even, probably 20 years ago, I was doing some essay writing, and I even wrote this whole essay. I don't think I ever did anything with it. I don't even think I posted it on our blog, but about this pity award and how I internalized that as, I'm, in a sense, this is something where I guess what the adults around me think that, my future is dead, like this is what I have to look forward to, like, or this piece of me. And so that stuck with me. And I don't know why it's come up recently of like wanting to dive into it again and kind of, I don't know, just it still was giving me such a bad feeling that I decided I wanted to dig a little bit deeper.
So when you started digging a little deeper, what did you find?
I think there was some pieces that I was missing, some pieces of information. When I really started to look back to my 8th grade year, which I actually loved, basically I had this team of the 3 teachers who were really engaged. I feel like they knew me well. I feel like they liked me. I got good grades. I had a really good group of friends. And that hadn't been the case earlier in middle school. I had transferred at the end of 7th grade after a bullying situation at a previous school. And so I really had kind of started over and had developed this, I was involved then in cross country and just had this strong group of friends. I had my writing. I had, just my different gifts within school that were recognized, I guess not publicly at an awards ceremony, but within this realm. And it was something that I was thinking, gosh, it just started to make me fill in certain details of like, these teachers knew me well. Like maybe there was one of them that kind of pitied me and were like, oh yeah, special people award. We're going to give that to Joy because of her eyes. But I started to think, I think there's more to that story. I think that actually they saw more in me of overcoming multiple things and having started over and, thriving in this environment. And I started to like really pay attention to those things. And I kind of had this different picture, even of just like I think the shame around switching schools too, that I had previously internalized as, oh my gosh, I ran away from a problem. I ran away from this situation. And then it kind of, sometimes when you dig into one story, it helps you kind of unravel a whole slew of stories attached to that story. And that one was attached to the whole narrative of I ran away from a problem. I'm not strong. I am weak. I don't face things head on, when really I was like, gosh, that took so much courage for, 13-year-old Joy to go to the principal, go to her parents and say, hey, this isn't an environment I can be in anymore. I need to switch schools. And then to start over and just have a new group of friends and to do all of that. Like that took a lot of courage. And instead of that picture of, oh, I'm someone who ran away, it was like, gosh, I'm someone who started over.
And ran towards something that was really positive. And as you described all those pieces of really your identity that came to light when it came to the strength from running cross country and your writing skills and your friendships and really being seen as a leader at your new school and really being recognized by teachers. Like so many of those things are part of your identity today. And so I think that's such a powerful story. That was a huge piece of your transition that in the past you saw as pretty disempowering, and now you're recognizing are a huge part of how you have thrived.
Yes, thank you. And it is helping me in the present because I, have, like we all do, some current struggles, and I'm thinking of something where I'm like, gosh, is this too much for me? Do I need to leave this one situation, or do I keep going? And instead of it being like this very black and white, like, okay, you can't handle this, you're going to have to leave. It's like, I'm going to handle it as long as I can handle it. And when it's time to move toward the next thing and rebuild, I will do that. But it will not be leaving a current situation from a place of, oh my gosh, I had to do this, I'm running away. It will be, when it is the time, coming from a place of, I'm ready to rebuild because I've done this before and I can do it again.
I love that. That's so much more empowering and such a shift in that narrative and that story about yourself and really related to your identity.
Thank you. I'm curious if you have any similar stories. I know maybe not from as distant past as middle school, but that you've had to kind of rewrite and rumble with.
Yeah, I mean, I think in life there's so much we can always be rumbling with, and I tend to try not to rumble with every story. I think that would be exhausting, but I do notice when there's something that comes up again and again that's like, oh, that's something that maybe should be addressed. And when I had my children a number of years ago with my second, who was almost 13, I had a pretty traumatic birth. And the story that really was rising to the surface for me following his birth was that I'm weak. And I felt a lot of shame about feeling weak, about how that birth went so differently than I thought it would, and was physically traumatic, and was holding a lot of that in my body. And I did seek some EMDR therapy, which was really helpful in not just shifting the narrative part of the story, but also what I was holding in my body, because there's kind of a famous saying in the therapy world, our issues are in our tissues, and we hold on to trauma and stress in our bodies. And so that helped me really shift.
For those who don't know what EMDR is, can you say that?
Thanks, Joy, for keeping it real. It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it's a trauma-based therapy that uses bilateral movement. So it can use eye movements or tapping, auditory. There's different techniques to use, but it's really allowing you to process between the right hemisphere and left hemisphere of the brain. So your emotion-centered versus your cognitive-centered parts of the brain, to really help you to integrate and come to some more adaptive understandings of your story, of limiting beliefs about yourself, and then what you hold in the body as well. So that's a really brief.
So fancy words for your eye movement. Looking around at lights. Wait,
I mean, if you were to sit down at a EMDR session, like I have in my office, there's a light bar that I actually control with an app on my phone.
You feel so powerful,
so powerful.
Super lightsaber.
There's an app for everything, right? So there's an app to control these, and so a session will look like someone. It's based on the theory that as human beings, we are always working towards a more adaptive understanding within ourselves. We are. And sometimes that can get stuck. That can get stuck for years and stuck for a variety of reasons. And that's why EMDR is an evidence-based, proven therapy that can be really empowering for some people, for people that it resonates with. So for me, it resonated. And that was in combination, though, with also reaching out to the doula who had been present at that birth and really expressing to her at one point just how terrible I felt about how the birth had turned out, and how weak I felt, and just those memories of really feeling out of control of what was happening to me and my body. And it was really such a shift when she said to me, "Can I tell you what I remember about your birth?" She remembered me as really strong and courageous and adaptive in the midst of something that was really hard and really unexpected, and just having her reframe that for me and with me was really empowering and helped me to shift, along with the EMDR, helped me to shift within my system how I feel about myself. And it didn't change the memory. And that's the important thing here. Like, none of this cognitive reframing, EMDR, none of it changes what actually happens, but it changes our relationship to it.
I like that. Changes our relationship with it. I like that you were able to go to someone too that was, I'm imagining you felt the sense of safety to go to her and ask, and to say that you were struggling with this, because I can see, especially, with certain practitioners and in the medical field, that somebody saying, oh, you did fine, you were good, kind of being a little bit dismissive.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, yes. And that was actually the immediate experience I had with my OB. He was very dismissive and pretty judgmental, actually, around some things. And I think that actually added to my pain around the experience. And so that is an important piece when we are reframing our stories, when we're working through, when we're rumbling with the story, as Brene Brown says, rumbling with the narrative. It's important to reach out to trusted people to help support us working through that. And I know you recently did that with something you were rumbling with a friend, and I found it really powerful. So I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So I think that, we can rumble with past stories and that can be helpful. But of course, the day-to-day things, the things that are coming up are ones that also sometimes require some rumbling. And I had a friend who I hadn't been in touch with as much recently. She's been a close friend for years, but I've had felt like maybe for the past year or so, I would reach out a lot, but she wouldn't really reach out to me, and I would text sometimes or call or try to call and kind of have try to make that connection. And it was kind of some short texts back, and there were just not a lot of attempts for connection. And so I really started to feel like, gosh, maybe she doesn't really consider me a good friend anymore, and maybe I'm not that important to her. And I was tempted to kind of just withdraw and say, okay, gosh, I'm just not really going to put any effort in that friendship. That's not going anywhere. But then I just had all these memories of so many good moments with her. And I still was like, gosh, she's somebody I value so much, and I still want to have connection with her. I don't want to just do that. I said, I wonder like how much of this is the story. I had to first figure out what the story was. And then once I did, and the story was, again, like, I'm making up the story that I'm not that important to her, that our friendship's not important to her. And I thought, instead of just making that true, I had enough trust in this friend that I felt like I could come to her and just say, hey, I'm making up this story. And I literally phrased it like this. I said, I'm making up this story that our friendship's not that important because I don't hear from you a lot. And I feel like I reach out a lot and it's not really reciprocated. And she was able to respond and say, I've actually really been struggling with my mental health, and I'm so sorry if that caused you to doubt your importance and value to me. It was like so much was lifted. I mean, I've still obviously felt so much sadness for her and sadness that the friendship couldn't be the reciprocal, connective friendship that it was in this present moment. But it kind of gave me that hope of like, oh gosh, first of all, my friend needs care, and my friend she's trying to meet her needs. And second of all, this is something that we can continue to work on, and that I can still be in relationship with her. And since then she is doing so much better. And I've spent some really, really quality moments with her that I don't think I would have had if I hadn't been able to use that language of, hey, this is the story I'm telling myself. Because then it was acknowledging to her. It wasn't coming to her and being like, you never text me back. You never, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like sometimes people do in relationships. It was just like, hey, this is the story I have. And it gave her that freedom to kind of answer in a way of what was going on for her.
Yeah, I love that. The story I'm telling myself or this is the story I'm telling myself, just leading with that for yourself helped you first to understand the story you were telling yourself. And then it helped you to reach out and share that story and find out that actually that story was untrue.
Right. Exactly.
Joy, that must have been vulnerable to share your story with your friend.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't really sure what her response would be. And if she was in a painful story herself, then maybe things wouldn't have gone the way that they did. Because I think that's when people have the most conflict often, is when they're both in a story at once. And I know that's something that we've all gone through. And you have a recent experience, Jenelle, at a retreat where that happened. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was in a small group where we were just getting to know several other people in the larger group. There was about over 100 people there. And so in my small group, we were going around giving introductions, and I did not see, because of my peripheral vision, that there was someone off to my right who it was her turn to go next. So I just started speaking, and then someone said, "Oh, wait, we missed someone." And then I said, "Oh, sorry. Yeah, you go ahead and introduce yourself." And then I felt so much shame in my body, though, around doing something wrong related to my vision. And that's
In public.
in public, and that's in front of other people. And that's an old story for me, and something that I still have to address at times. And so then fast forward the next day, it just so happened, out of this retreat of over 100 people, to be in another small group in a different workshop with this same woman. And we were going around sharing some of our shame triggers for the exercise in that workshop. And I shared that one of my shame triggers is doing things wrong related to my vision, such as not seeing someone, not including someone that had happened the day before. And then she turned to me and said, "Thank you so much for sharing that, because my shame trigger is that nobody ever sees me." And so it was so interesting that I unintentionally had touched on a really painful part of her story while I was in the midst of my own painful story.
Yeah, when those pain stories intersect. And I think that's often why people end up taking things personally when somebody gets upset with them, because they don't know that they're in a story. So that kind of helps me, and I think all of our listeners, to think about how, gosh, sometimes when somebody is really mad or upset or feels bad, it has something to do with a deep old story, and we don't have to take it personally because it has nothing to do with us. I'm curious, with both you or your clients, how do you handle, or are you handling, day-to-day stories and working through those?
Well, like I said earlier, I don't feel like it's helpful to address every single story. I think that can lead to some rumination and a lot of like over processing, over rumbling, and yet noticing when there's stories that continue to rise up again and again, especially if there's stories that are pretty limiting about yourself or about others. Just like, hey, am I telling myself a story here, or could this be untrue? So starting to just question that, and then starting to work with it in really compassionate and caring and gentle ways, and reaching out for support when that is needed. And that's what I heard you doing in both the stories you were rumbling with.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we could over ruminate, and I don't want to dig into every single thing, the interactions that happen throughout the day, because it could be a lot. But I do think those ones that you ruminate on, and these were two things that I was ruminating on. And so that's when I'm like, okay, when I'm ruminating, I know it's time to dig in and do a little rumbling, which, isn't easy, because it would be much easier to make a conclusion either way, right? I think that we like to make ourselves, either, as a writer, I think about it in this framework of like the villain of our story, the villain or the hero, the protagonist or the antagonist. And, as we know, it's usually somewhere in between. If we always made ourselves the hero and the protagonist, well, that would kind of be narcissism, right? Like if we didn't take the time to dig in and rumble with our stories, and we were just always like, well, you know what? They're wrong. I'm always right, kind of thing. That also wouldn't really serve us in our relationships and in life.
Yeah. So you're noticing that as you are able to recognize these and rumble a little bit more, you're not the antagonist or protagonist. You're more of the author of your story.
Yeah, it's kind of what Brene Brown in her book Rising Strong talks about, writing a brave new ending and being the authors of our stories.
So Joy, if someone's starting to dig into their stories, what might be a first step for them?
Yeah, so it can be an intimidating process, right? To just be like, oh, I'm going to start rumbling with that old story or this current one of something I'm ruminating on. So I think just to first come to it from a place of a really compassionate observer. I think we have so much judgment of ourselves and other people. And when we're able to give ourselves and our stories that compassionate observer. So like for example, going back to my story from middle school, if I had not been willing to just say, oh, are you, to that kind of inner critic, are you sure that was just a pity award? Are you sure you didn't deserve that? Are you sure that's something you should still be ashamed of? Like, what else do you see in that story? What else is true here? So being able to shift to that compassionate observer. And that's where really, again, we're not looking at ourselves then as the hero or the villain of our story. That's when we're able to see, hey, I actually have a say in what my brave new ending of this story is. I get to help author this.
I appreciate that, especially the curiosity and not in the questioning of like, are you sure about that? And that's just done in a really gentle way.
Yeah, I think curiosity has served both of us well. I'm wondering for you, what would be a first step? I know you don't do it as much with words, but a little bit more somatically. What is a first step that you try to go to?
I think because I tend to be in my head so much, I really have been working with moving more into my heart and into my body. And so being the compassionate observer in my body really looks like noticing where I'm holding tension around a story, where I might feel some tightness, some holding, really inviting in a little bit more gentleness. So even as I'm describing it right now, I'm just noticing like where my shoulders are tight, where my hips are just like clenching, like we tend to do as humans when it comes to stress or anything that we're holding. And so I try to invite in a little bit of ease, gentleness, relaxation into the body. And then I notice as my body shifts, I'm able to work with my stories in less harsh ways.
I really like that, especially because it just causes you, again, to observe, but in a different way, and observing what's going on inside. Our bodies don't lie. So as we transition to the end of our episode today, we are going to move to a little segment that has become a tradition to lighten things up a bit. All right, wrapping it up with a different version of Twin Telepathy meets Memory Lane, where we're going to ask a series of 3 questions from childhood. Janelle, take it away.
So we each prepared these questions and answers in advance without comparing answers. So the first question is, what meal did we eat most often in childhood? 1, 2, 3.
Chicken
lasagna.
with orange juice. Oh, lasagna.
Maybe I just liked the lasagna more, but
Maybe.
now that you say it, I remember a lot of chicken with orange juice.
With that like orange juice from concentrate from the can. From
Yep.
freezer.
Midwest cooking.
Yeah, maybe I didn't like that, but I liked lasagna. Okay, second question. What dessert did Dad make the most? 1, 2, 3.
Rice pudding. I mean, I think it's the only dessert he made, so it's kind of an easy one.
And ice cream.
Okay, and the third and final question is, what liquid did Jenelle pour over Joy's head at the dinner table in 3rd grade? 1, 2, 3.
Orange
Milk.
juice? You poured milk on my head?
I'm pretty sure it was milk or water, maybe. I remember it being milk because it was kind of gross, and I felt really guilty, but the fun of pouring liquid beverage over someone else's head just far outweighed any consequences in that moment in my 9-year-old undeveloped prefrontal cortex I'm giving all my...
I blocked that one out. I must have blocked it out. But I'll get you back. You just wait. One of these nights, I'm going to pour milk on your head.
You have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, so you should have some...
No excuse.
No excuses. Yeah, you should have some impulse control at this point.
We'll see. I'm excited because in our next episode, we're actually going to interview a couple experts in the field of storytelling as it relates with advocacy and how our stories can really help us advocate for not only our own needs, but those of other fellow human beings. So stay tuned, listeners. We're excited to see you on our next episode. Be well. Thanks for listening to Double Vision Podcast. The stories and perspectives shared here reflect our own lived experiences with blindness and disability and do not represent all blind or disabled people. This podcast is for conversation and reflection only and is not intended as therapy or a replacement for professional mental health care. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review wherever you listen. You can also leave us a voice message at 949-414-8336 or email mail@doublevisionblog.com with any suggestions for future episodes or comments. Special thanks to our production team, TLS Productions and Benjamin J. Thomas.